Thank you all so much for attending the Buffs Chancellor Welcome, our opportunity to officially welcome Chancellor Justin Schwartz to campus and learn a bit more about him and his priorities. My name is Grace Coveney, and I am one of the CU Boulder Student Government Tri-Executives. I am a junior from Highlands Ranch, Colorado, majoring in communications and double minoring in sports media and marketing. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you who are attending in person or online. We will have a brief program for you this morning and then a chance to meet the Chancellor personally as we enjoy breakfast together. I'd like to begin with our land acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts, while the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples. We commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. We will do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, engaging, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Our conversation moderator today is Dr. Stephanie K. Johnson, Director of the CU Boulder Center for Leadership and Associate Professor in the Leeds School of Business. She is a widely published business professor and has brought nearly $4 million in grant funding to CU from organizations including NASA, CDC, and the Army Research Institute. She is the author of the Wall Street Journal national best-selling book, Inclusify, which focuses on how leaders can create more inclusive and innovative organizations. She has lent her expertise and thought leadership to organizations like the World Economic Forum and the National Football League. And she has presented her work at over 170 meetings around the world, including at the White House for a 2016 Summit on Diversity in Corporate America. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Johnson. Chancellor Justin Schwartz has spent his career as a researcher, educator, entrepreneur, and academic leader. Justin, as he prefers to be called, was named CU Boulder's 12th Chancellor in April 2024 and started the role on July 1st. He most recently served as Executive Vice President and Provost at Penn State University, where he also served as the Harold and Inga Marcus Dean of the College of Engineering for 5 years. Justin has spent his career in large public and land-grant universities, including faculty and leadership roles at Florida State University and North Carolina State University. He earned degrees in nuclear engineering from the University of Illinois and MIT. Justin believes in the power of higher education to transform lives and is committed to helping students, staff, and faculty survive and thrive as members of an inclusive and just CU Boulder. Please join me in welcoming our new Chancellor, Justin Schwartz, and Stephanie Johnson to the stage.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I'm thrilled to see so many people here. I didn't realize that the subsequent food was going to be such a draw.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you're going to go network with people after
Absolutely.
Our conversation,
Yes.
So I think that's huge.
Yep.
So I've already welcomed you, but I want to ask, so in Boulder, what's the most Boulder thing that you've done?
So, done a few hikes, and that's clearly very Boulder, but I would probably point to an event that maybe was a little bit more heavy, but that was the Ride for Magnus, right, which recognized the death of a Boulder figure in cycling, who was the very beginning really of his life. And it was, over 3,500 cyclists came out, and it was not just to commemorate and remember him, but it was to advocate for safety, right? It was to advocate for stronger laws to protect cyclists and pedestrians. So I think it was very Boulder because it was cycling, it was caring, it was about the community. It wasn't just about remembering, but it was about being activist and saying, we do well, we can do better. And I think that's really, to me, one of the fundamental themes is we do really well, we can do even better.
Yeah. Are there more things that you need to cross off your Boulder bucket list?
Oh yeah, well I think there's how many 14ers, right? And the one that's probably the most unlikely to ever happen, but I'm really gonna keep pushing for, is I really wanna run with Ralphie.
Oh, wow.
And I will say, all the conversations I've had with people in the few months I've been here, the person who's been the most adamant and firm in her backbone in saying no is Taylor, who oversees the Ralphie program. And but that is always going to be, she's not going to stop hearing about it.
That's good. I think you have to train pretty hard for...
Oh, so I've just by happenstance been in the gym with the Ralphie runners, and I will tell you, they work out hard.
It's just by happenstance that you're there at the same time.
Well, the first time it was, but I swear, I think, so I first met Taylor and Ralphie and the runners on a Friday at an event they were having for fundraising for the Ralphie program. And I talked to Taylor about, oh yeah, I want to run with, I don't have to hold the rope, right? And then a couple of them were listening and they said, well, why don't you come run all the stadium stairs with us tomorrow? And I said, well, I don't need to do that part. But then I did happen to be in the gym that Tuesday, and I know when they work out, I learned when they work out because they were there, and they're intense. I mean, they are really intense.
They're certainly athletes, for sure.
They're really good athletes, yeah. I mean, I've watched them do, some of them do multiple sets of pull-ups with 50, 60 pounds hanging off their shoulders, and they do them with ease.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very Boulder.
Yes, that's very Boulder, right, exactly. So that's more aspirational than...
Yeah, absolutely.
If that's on my bucket list, I'll probably never die.
Yeah, I'll ask you this again in 2 years, how you've made progress toward running with Ralphie. I'm sure there's someone in here that could make that happen, right? No, I see some, no, it's never happening. So I learned you started your listening tour.
Yes.
Which is amazing that you're doing that. And you started with engineering and applied sciences.
Yes.
Tell me, what did you experience in that first stop on the tour, and what do you hope to continue learning?
Great, so well, thank you. And I would say that is my home college, but I think that was purely coincidental that I was first.
Just like the Ralphie runners.
Exactly. I don't do my own scheduling. No, it was fantastic. So we spent some time with the leadership team, and then a more open forum, and then like today, some social time afterwards. And the message gave the Dean Molinar in advance, and I've been sharing with the other deans as I meet with them to prepare for the visit, is in this role, I spend too much time hearing my own voice. And the purpose of those visits is to hear their voices, right? So, I feel comfortable after really a lifetime in higher ed at multiple large state and land-grant universities. I feel comfortable that I'm with higher ed, where we are as an industry, where we're going, what our challenges are. So I feel like I know higher ed well, but I need to know CU Boulder well. And so I really want to hear from people, what are the things that they're experiencing? Where can we, where are we doing good that we can do great? Where are we doing great that we can do even greater? Where are we having challenges that we need to address? And really get some tangible, strategic communications is there in the room. They're taking notes. We have a website launched where we're going to share, here are the questions and concerns and things that people raised, and here's how we're going to try to address them, because I maybe should have titled it a listening tour with action follow-up, but that's not a very catchy title. Maybe the marketing folks can come up with something better.
Yeah.
But the idea here is not just to listen and learn, but to listen, learn, and act.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So one of the things that you've said really from the beginning, I think soon after you started in July, you've been talking about sustainability. And so you announced the Vice Chancellor of Sustainability position. There is so many opportunities around sustainability on campus. It's one of the things, we have a large percentage of our classes focused on sustainability. The Center for Leadership is working with Arts and Sciences to launch a certificate in sustainable leadership. There is, I think, the most outstanding research in the country being done on sustainability right here on our campus. So for you, when you said sustainability, I'm like, this makes a lot of sense, but I want to hear more. Why sustainability? Why here? Why now?
Right, great, thank you. So when people ask me, okay, so why did you want to come to Boulder, right? I didn't let myself be in other searches, but jumped on this one. And the position description talked at length about how important sustainability is to CU Boulder, and that really stood out to me. And so really, sustainability is one of the reasons why I'm here. And so, one of the questions I got frequently, in those few months of sole finalist to named but not started yet was, we do so much in sustainability, why aren't we better known for it, right? And how can we do more? So when I talk about things where we're great and be greater, this is probably right at the top of that list, right? And so the idea is to really focus on maximizing the impact that we have at every length scale. And by every length scale, I mean, we have a action plan for campus, and we want to accelerate that as much as we can, and even expand it beyond just energy into, I'd love to get rid of single-use plastic, right? California's banning plastic bags, why don't we, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many other opportunities here locally. But I also recognize that if Boulder became like the most sustainable campus in the world and was perfect score in every area, the world is still a mess. Right, and so I'd like to see the impact of what we do at Boulder across the state, across the country, and across the globe. And so in this position, and I think the search launched yesterday, so if you have candidates in mind, send them in. We have a great search firm working on it, is to give me a leader at the highest level who can lead us in the global stage, who can lead us on the national stage, who can engage with the state and saying, how does CU Boulder become the driving force for Colorado being the most sustainable state in the country, right? And I want us to be known as the university that leads all universities in sustainability, but ultimately I want that to be a tie, because I want all universities to lead in sustainability. So there'll be a huge focus on, I don't want someone to come in and try to direct what faculty do, because the faculty working in the space are fantastic and know their fields, but someone who can amplify their impact, amplify their reputation, give them more opportunities for visibility, more opportunities for connecting across the country and around the globe. I want someone who's going to help staff understand the critical role that they play, not just on campus, but in all the endeavors that we do. I want to think about what do we need to create organizationally so that a community, hours from here in Colorado has a challenge, and they say, how do we become more sustainable because of this? Let's call Boulder, right? I want us to be known across the state as this is the place to go if you have a sustainability challenge that you need to address.
So that sparks.
And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I forgot about that. I didn't mean to leave the students out. It's more of a save the best for last.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a certificate program in leadership, right? So I've met with sustainability leaders for Fortune 100 companies, and what I hear from them often is, we want to do more in sustainability, we struggle with human resources, why aren't people being trained specifically in that area, right? So my call out to the faculty is work together across colleges, across disciplines, all disciplines, and where's our Bachelor of Science in Sustainability? Where's our Bachelor in the Arts of Sustainability, right? We know the students want it, we know the employers want it, right? And we know we have huge infrastructure, intellectual capabilities in our faculty already, classes on the books. So that next step seems sort of like, let's do it. Let's take the leadership in that also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was our thought process. Is we have sustainability programs at Leeds, which is my home college. Those students have great business acumen around sustainability, but there's people doing the science over in ENBS and A&S and engineering. Like, let's bring those worlds together so they have skills in both areas.
Right.
But
and beyond that, I would say, maybe coming from an engineering background, it's an experiential bias. But I don't think of sustainability as being a STEM discipline.
Okay.
It's a human discipline, right? And so the role of the arts and social sciences and music and every enterprise at Boulder has an important role and contribution to make. And I think we need to acknowledge that. And it's a topic that needs complete de-siloing. The focus is on this small challenge of making sure humans can keep living on the planet.
just a little challenge. So that sparked two really different questions for me. One, on the research side and what you've talked about in terms of elevating the research profile of the university, and then the other on the community side. So I have both. I'm going to go community side first. Do you see other ways that every faculty, staff, student, every person on campus can get involved in sustainability?
Yeah, I hope so. Right. I mean, there's so much work to be done, and while there's the great research continues, I think where we're really lacking, and I don't mean we as CU Boulder, but I mean as a nation and as a globe, is taking that step of knowledge to implementation. Right. I mean, humans are amazingly resistant to change, even when we know it's in their best interest. Right. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. We are truly a species of habit. And so being mindful of we can do something differently is, I think, an important piece. I had a sustainability leader at Penn State came to me once. She's a faculty member who I'd asked to take on leadership for sustainability for the college. And she came to me and said, okay, I'm willing to do it as long as we're not only talking about biodegradable spoons. Right?
Yeah.
Which was sort of like, oh, well, we have the, like, how are we thinking bigger? What else can we implement? So to me, it's one of those topics where the answer is almost always yes and.
There's always more. I was just at this meeting on campus, Impact Venture Capital Summit. It was a bunch of finance people doing impact investing around real sustainability really broadly defined, and that was kind of their point. There's so many things.
Right, and I think of that, I go back to a book I read on this like 25 years ago by Paul Hawkins and the Lovins, both Lovins, right, on natural capitalism, right? That whole idea of using the things that we know motivate people from the economic side, the business side, to do the outcomes that we want on the social and human side.
It's huge. Okay, so now I want to go to the other side, the faculty, and not just in sustainability, although that's a huge strength, but I hear you saying you want to elevate the research profile of the university. I've been here a while, and we always talk about being the best kept secret. Our faculty research is the best kept secret, and I've always thought, why do we want that to be a secret? Like, what are we aiming at here? So what are you going to do to change that?
So, I think when we say we're the best kept secret, we're not bragging.
Yeah. We're like, dang
I think that's self-critique.
Yeah.
So, this is an area where we need to, we think about two ways of doing things in like the general sense. One is, let's have one big event, and the other is, let's have a persistent drumbeat. And this is a persistent drumbeat conversation for a number of reasons. One, we're a large university, and we have research and scholarly and creative expertise in so many disciplines. Every college we have truly has areas that are world leading. And so, it's easy in today's world to only focus on the most readily measurable things, right? So we talk about research dollars, and we certainly want to see that continue to go up. But we also need to make sure that in our communications, in our marketing strategy, in our reputational strategy, that we don't, the research dollars are a means, not an ends, and that we focus on the outcomes of the faculty, which should mean that we're amplifying the humanities as much as the engineering, right? The music as much as the basic science, and talk about what we do and talk about our colleagues, right? Another way to really enhance reputation is, when you walk to your office, unless you're like the first door by the entrance, in which case this doesn't work. As you walk down the hall of your office, think to yourself, in my community, the person whose door I just walked by has an award that person should be winning. How do I nominate my colleague? Right?
Wow.
So it's not just a role of, let's go to the communications people and tell them to talk about us more. Let's talk about each other more, right? Yeah. Let's have a community that elevates each other, right? I mean, if you look at the places that, consistently have the most academy members and things like that, that's why, right? They have built a system of mutual support. And I've known faculty who, in a department, who never would speak to each other for all sorts of reasons. But as soon as they got off campus, they were each other's biggest cheerleaders.
Oh yeah.
Because that's important that we recognize each other and support each other. It's actually a great way to build, community as well, because people see, if you recognize the person in the next door, right, they're going to do the same, and it's a way of elevating ourselves. So it's one of those things that we certainly need a robust communication strategy, right, within each college and centrally to amplify a consistent message in a strategic way. But we also need to take a little bit of ownership ourselves and just do it for each other on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that's very empowering for each of us and for staff too, to
Right.
share and amplify the message.
Right, and it's an
All those
opportunity also
Boulder case studies.
for deans and department heads to recognize their own faculty, right, and bring that,
Yeah.
that positivity back to, we sometimes forget to acknowledge the great things that all of our colleagues are doing because we get caught up in our own day-to-day.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I got to go to DEI.
Okay, good.
I wrote the book Inclusify. I follow your messaging around DEI.
Okay, so what am I
very
doing wrong?
closely.
You're the expert, right?
I'll tell you off stage. No, I'm kidding. But you talk about it so much that we need to mirror our state at the least in terms of student enrollment. But the question I always have for people championing DEI is, why do you think this is important for you? And then, what are you going to do?
Right. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a slight correction to what you said.
Okay.
So you don't hear me often talking about having our student enrollment match the demographics of Colorado. You'll hear me talk about having our graduating classes match
Ooh, thank you. Yes.
the distribution of Colorado, because bringing students in and not seeing them through to graduation is not doing them a favor.
Thanks
And
for
if you
saying
look
that.
at all of the data that says, the impact of a bachelor's degree on long-term, family socioeconomic status is huge. The impact of some college and not graduating is small and may not be greater than the debt they took on.
Yep.
Right, and so the focus is going to be on graduating classes that match the Colorado demographics, which means one of our initial jobs has got to be closing the gap in retention and graduation rate. And there are a lot of things that we need to do that. And one of the things I've asked the team to do is let's take another look at our data. Let's really understand and have as much confidence as we can in the numbers of why do we not have a 100% graduation rate of every student of every demographic?
Yeah.
Right now, 100% would be stunning, but and then how do we back out and say, okay, what's really the lowest hanging fruit? And there's examples of other universities that have done this. Their whys are probably very different than ours, but their process of really digging in and understanding their own numbers and finding, so often it's a ripple effect. It's an unintended consequence of one thing that leads to another that ends up in a student not progressing, right? And so unfolding that and unraveling that and getting back to the source is really the first what,
Yep.
right? We are going to look at how we build a bigger presence across the state to help with in-state recruitment. I mean, Amy Hutton is already hit the ground running. She's about a year or so before me doing that work. And my background is really in systems engineering. So when we talk about having a presence across the state for sustainability, it's also going to give us a presence across the state, which is going to help with student recruitment across the state. We need, what I've heard from so many communities is that Boulder's 30, 40 minutes from Denver, but it might as well be 10 hours, right? And that there's some historic viewpoints about who Boulder is that doesn't give a welcoming message to all the communities across the state. And so we need to look at that. And there's also the faculty side. And so, we want to definitely double down on, moving into that upper echelon of AAU universities in terms of our faculty demographics. And I also want to use that, but I also want to pivot to really focusing on striving to have faculty demographics that are more representative of Colorado also, and using that as the pathway to get to that AAU numbers. And the other thing that's important to mention in the DEI space is, what I'm not talking about is we've been working on this for the last few years, and now we're going to stop doing that and doing this. This is a yes and, right? So we talk a lot about it. The easiest thing to talk about is numbers, right? Like it was in the research dollars, it is also in the demographic space. But fundamentally, if we don't do the cultural work, right, the day in and day out work, right, that persistent drumbeat, then the demographics won't be sustainable. And so, the shared equity leadership model that's been rolled out, which is, intended to help everyone have a role in this work, and help our culture across the campus, have that continuous improvement mindset. That's still a core principle, right? This is, again, it's that yes and,
Yep.
right? It's yes, we've got to interrogate and grow, improve our own culture, And we need to have, some quantitative goals and metrics by which we look at what our performance is.
Do you apply your logic to student retention and graduation to faculty tenure within the university and
Absolutely.
and retention as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. I mean, sustainability we talk about in one context, but even in the DEI context, solutions that are sustainable are what's important, right?
Right.
We don't want a demographic spike, right? Just like we're trying to avoid a demographic cliff in terms of in other contexts. So we really want to think about not just onboarding faculty, but again, seeing just as we see students through graduation, I'd like to see, in the long term or in the short term, the demographics of our endowed faculty, of our distinguished faculty,
Yeah.
should represent our faculty, and our faculty should represent the state. And so it's truly not just a commitment to onboarding, right? It's a commitment to experience. It's a commitment to, the phrase I use a lot is, CU Boulder should be a destination of choice for, and fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
Whether the fill in the blank is future Nobel Prize winners or minoritized students from, rural Colorado or minoritized students from anywhere in the country or in the globe, we should be a destination of choice for whomever, right, is within this sphere of what we're trying to accomplish.
That's huge. That's so inspiring. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay, free expression. We got your administrative e-memo about
Okay.
free expression. I know we're entering this very political season. I think there's a lot of polarized viewpoints. I feel like civil discourse has been lost. Do you have any advice for our students, our faculty, our staff, for how to make it through the next few months in a really productive, communicative, positive way?
Right. So I hope we make it not just through the next few months, but
Maybe
the next
forever.
few decades.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to take a step back from the immediacy of the moment. I was reading this morning. Right now, there are 92 countries who are involved in cross-border conflict, over 50 conflicts around the globe. We have shootings in this country all the time, right? There are climate challenges that are attacking places around the globe all the time. So there is really good reason that people are feeling tense and anxious because the world's kind of a mess, right? And so I think we need to start simply by taking a step back and taking a moment to reflect and recognize each other's humanity, right? So there's probably some topic that you and I would disagree on, and we can disagree on it, but it doesn't mean that I have any less compassion and empathy for you as a human and what you experience as a human. I think we need to start with that recognition that no matter what topic I'm disagreeing with you on, right, I don't disagree with your natural right to exist and thrive, right? And start with that because the world is tense. There's a lot of difficult, challenging things. There are a lot of people on this planet who are suffering every day because of circumstances beyond their control. And I think if we don't start with that recognition and that understanding, then everything else just sounds like policy speak. And we do have policies, and we're firm believers in First Amendment and up to the point of invading somebody else's First Amendment rights. We are firmly committed to safety and belonging and well-being, and all of those go with start with mutual respect and empathy, right? And same conversation in DEI, right? We need to start with mutual respect and empathy, and then go from there. So I think that, to me, that's really where I would focus on. Yes,
Yeah.
Please, everyone, follow all the policies and rules in terms of how we give opportunity for people to do free expression and free speech. But let's start with that recognition of why we support free speech,
For
right?
sure.
And what's the point, right? It's in the founding of our country, right? Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? That's where we're really focused.
I feel like Boulder sometimes has this reputation of like, we're really open-minded, as long as you agree with us.
Well, I can't argue with that, right?
Yeah. I think that can stand in the way of what you're saying, because
Right.
we, I don't know, kind of pride ourselves on being open-minded, curious people.
Right.
And so, I don't know, maybe we don't have as much practice at,
Right. And then the reality, we are a community of incredible scholars. And in our own scholarship and disciplines, right, what we do every day is challenge our own thought.
Yep.
Right? The nature of being creative and innovative, right, is to actually say, my discipline thought this, but here's something new, now we think that, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of, it should be in our nature, and we need to then extend that to an openness across all experiences.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so what did I miss? What have I not touched on that you would like to share? Are there other priorities that weren't captured yet?
So I do, and this may be a little more on the mundane side, but there was already work started on how do we become more of an efficient organization, right? We have rolled out a new budget model was rolled out just before I started, and I know there's lots of there are pockets, or I don't know if it's pockets of or lots of angst in places around that. One of my goals is to increase the percentage of the budget that goes into the academic and student support and research aspects of the university, but not by reducing the support that faculty and students get, right? But really thinking about are there ways that we can operate differently that are simply structural inefficiencies that by making a change, we don't take away from our ability to meet the mission, but maybe can put more resources into it. So, one of my goals is to see that continuously increase year over year.
That's great. That's applying sustainability to a budget problem.
Exactly. Well, and I disagree that we have a budget problem right now. I mean, maybe it's because if you can read the paper and see places that have budget problems, I came from one. But, what we don't want to do is wait until we have a budget problem to become more efficient and more effective and put our resources to the best use. Because while we do advocate to get more from the state, right, we are near the bottom in that per capita, but we still value the resources we get. And I think the more we consistently show that we are truly good stewards of the resources we use and we put them to our faculty and to our students, the more of a case we have for seeking other funding.
Awesome. Okay, so I know you're going to go out and talk to people, but I'd love to just sum up with hearing, what are you really most optimistic about and excited about in this new transition for you here?
So, when you interview for a position and then you start the position, you're kind of waiting to see, okay, what was the marketing versus a reality, right? What's behind the curtain that you didn't get to look behind? So I was still looking for it, to be honest with you. So I would say, what really excites me every day is this really is a fantastic place. We have awesome people across the faculty, across the staff. Grace just demonstrated how fantastic our students are. Was it like 43% of our incoming students are 4.0 or higher grade point average, wow. Right? That's pretty amazing. This is an amazing place, and if you reflect on the priorities I'm talking about, it's nothing kind of new, right? I mean, these are things that CU Boulder's been working on already, and what I'm looking to do is say, hey, you know what? We're already headed in the right direction. Let's focus a bit. Let's amplify certain aspects, and let's fine-tune what we're doing. But let's double down on these big priorities and really go all in.
Oh, excellent. All right, so if I didn't ask your question, guess what? There's time because Chancellor Schwartz is going to come out and mingle. So don't rush the stage. Let us safely exit. But
the Big 12 wasn't happy about that.
I know. Thank you so much for just your candor and coming and letting me just ask some wild questions.
Thank you all for coming also.
And welcome, Chancellor Schwartz.
Thank you so much.